down. Has he taken it?
शॉट और कैच आउट हो गए.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another episode of Cricket Mehfil. I'm your host, Behram Qazi, and we have been on a bit of a hiatus. I have been traveling, but we're back, and we're back with a bang in this mega episode, as we'll be talking Pakistan cricket with one of Pakistan's top sports journalists. He is a senior editor at ESPN Cricinfo and author of the book The Unquiet Ones. I have been pretty much reading his work since I was a young boy. Mr. Osman Samiuddin, welcome to the show, Usman Bhai. And I cannot begin to tell you how much of an honor and privilege it is for me to have the opportunity to pick your brains today.
Alright, thank you so much for having me, Behram, by the way. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm very, very pleased to be on. You know, I follow the site as much as I can very regularly. There's some great stuff coming off of it. So I'm more than happy to be here. And you've made me feel very old by saying that you've been reading me since you were a young boy, because I seem to think that I wasn't a young boy that long ago, but clearly I'm not.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I think it was 2004, 2005 when you joined ESPN Cricinfo, and that's
like full time was 2005, and I'd been writing for them since. Oh God, this is going to make me sound very old now. I'd been writing for them since 2002, so that's almost exactly 20 years now. I think the first time I wrote for them was. Actually, it would have been the end of that. Do you remember that? You won't remember it, but you will have heard of it. The Pakistan tour to New Zealand when they played 2 test matches in 2003, I think. And
yes, I remember that when Yusuf and Inzi chased down that mammoth target.
That's right.
Yep.
And Shoaib had that spell in that test, and Sami had it in the first test. So I think I wrote something about Moin Khan because he'd scored some runs in the first test, and that was like the first time that I had written on Cricinfo, and it must be it's close to 20 years, if not fully 20 years. So.
Well, we're glad to have you on Grassroots Cricket now, and yeah, that's around about the same time when I started watching cricket religiously, 2002, 2003. But anyway, I've got a list of topics ready to discuss with you, Usman Bhai, and the first one is right up your alley. You've been very vocal about this in the past, and it's Pakistan's management of their pace bowlers and injuries to their fast bowlers, and Shaheen Shah Afridi in particular. Now, Shaheen, we've been told that even though his workload management is a topic of hot debate, this particular injury was a freak injury with respect to fielding. That's how he got it. And the funny part is that even after getting injured, Shaheen was still with the squad. He toured the Netherlands and then also went to the Asia Cup. And from there on, we're told that he went to England to get treated privately on his own expenses, which he will be reimbursed for. But it wasn't really a great look for the PCB, and it really does, haunt Pakistan fans, and it makes them worried because Pakistan doesn't have a really good history when managing injuries to their fast bowlers. I mean, Umar Gul is the first name that comes to mind. So what's your take on this? I'm dying to hear it.
Yeah. So, I think a few caveats to start. One, fast bowlers do get injured. It's impossible for fast bowlers to go through an entire career without injuries. Now, especially, with the amount of matches that they play, the number of balls that they bowl, it's going to happen. The second point, Shaheen's injury was, like you said, it wasn't a workload management issue, although that issue had been building up, because people were kind of worried that he was bowling a lot. But, even that workload management thing, Behram, it comes down to the bowler himself as well. And, Shaheen, from what we've heard, from what he said, from what everyone around the team says, is that it's almost impossible to not get him to bowl, to kind of trying to get him to rest. He's so eager and keen to just be out there playing all the time. So, I certainly don't blame the management or the board on the workload management front, because it's difficult. It requires buy-in from the player as well. And I think, Shaheen, of course, at the age of 21 or whatever, you just want to play all the time, right? I understand that he's keen to play whenever and wherever possible, which is fine. But I think on the Shaheen case, this was an injury. And I think from the very start, I remember the day that it happened, I wasn't in Sri Lanka, of course, but, we have writers in Sri Lanka and we have our writers in Pakistan, reporters. And my first thing was, can we find out what the injury is? Because any player gets injured anywhere and you immediately have an update from their team that, he's got this kind of injury. there was nothing about Shaheen. There was only that he's suffered some bruising in his right knee. Or yeah, it was the right knee. And then there seemed to be noises that he will be fine for the second test, but then he didn't play the second test. So then it started becoming like, okay, maybe it's a little bit more serious. And then there wasn't any update on what had happened to his knee for a long time. Like, I know, granted, Pakistan weren't playing. They had a break after that test series before they went to the Netherlands. They had like a month, I think, pretty much. There was no update. He turned up at the training camp and nobody said that he's not going to be bowling at the training camp, but he's there to be part of the team. That didn't come out. And okay, fine. The board, he's a board employee. Maybe they felt like we don't need to go public with this information, but he is essentially, Pakistan's best cricketer right now, other than Babar. I guess he's the biggest name other than Babar and Rizwan right there. So you would expect there to be more communication from the board about what had happened to him. There wasn't any. Then he went to Netherlands, and people weren't really sure why he was going to Netherlands. Babar said that, we hope to have him play in the final ODI. And it was only in the Netherlands that it became kind of clear that, okay, this is a little bit more serious than just a bruising to the knee. It was only Shaheen's own, well, it wasn't Shaheen's own video, but it was a PCB's social media video in which he's talking to Virat Kohli, where they inadvertently kind of, revealed that he has a PCL injury. My only point in all this is that, one, they should have been a lot more open about the communication, about the nature of his injury, for everyone's sake, for his own sake, for the team's sake, for fans, for the board, for other stakeholders, sponsors and stuff, not least. And then, of course, it started emerging that there had been issues in the way he was being managed, as in, I don't think in terms of the treatment, but I think in terms of that there may have been some conflict between forces within the management and the board, the medical panel of the board and maybe parts of the management who felt that, look, we can rehab him with us if he stays as part of the team, whereas some doctors on the board felt that, no, he needs like specialized rehabilitation and stuff. And this kind of went on until he arrived for the Asia Cup. He wasn't going to play there. And then suddenly one day it emerged that he was going to the UK for specialized rehab, which, could have happened 4 weeks earlier, really, if it hadn't been. And you kind of wonder that, he is your, and the fact that he kind of paid himself, I think the fact that he paid his way to get to England, I think was a reflection of maybe a breakdown in the relationship between him and the board. I think he wanted to get out of there and have his knee looked at very quickly. And in the process, I think the board was maybe trying to sort out that trip, and he just went ahead and did it. Jalbazi mein thodi si usne jaake, khud kar liya. I think that there's an element of that to it. But, even that, it's not a great look, because it shows that your star player and it maybe doesn't 100% trust the board that's meant to kind of employ him and handle him. So I think there's been a series of kind of miscalculations by the board on this. I think, Shaheen's played a little part in it, I think, by kind of being wary and wanting to play all the time and stuff. I think there's been a little bit of that, but ultimately, I think it's another sign, and it's depressing because, the Pakistan Cricket Board changed their medical panel last year after what happened at the PSL when the COVID outbreak happened and they had to cut off the league and stuff. And, they changed their board. They've got new people in. They've got a new head of the panel. They've got an advisory panel with some very respected names on it. And yet still, you're seeing this problem emerge with one of your main players. And the real problem, Behram, really is, one, okay, that, it's a historical issue that has happened over the years. You mentioned Umar Gul. There's Junaid Khan's case. There's any number of players who have sought treatment abroad rather than be treated by the PCB for stuff like this. But the issue that really stands out to me is that, okay, this has happened with Shaheen and it became public because of the figure that he is. But think about all the other cricketers who play under the aegis of the PCB, play domestic cricket, who then get injured, and then who maybe don't have the same kind of access to medical resources and rehabilitation services that Shaheen did. We were told that the High Performance Center doesn't have enough medical personnel in there to kind of look after players who are coming in with in domestic cricket who are coming in with injuries and stuff. So, long story short, yes, there has been historically mistreatment of players with injuries. Shaheen was just, I think, a remarkable case because he's the one guy you would think that they would do anything to kind of wrap in cotton wool and take care of and diagnose his injuries and get him the best treatment. I touch wood for Pakistan's sake. I hope he recovers and he's fine and that delay has not proved, critical. Knee injuries are not great injuries for fast bowlers. And that's why it makes it even more galling that there was this delay of about 4 weeks where, there was effectively one camp within the PCB management saying that, look, we can rehab him on tour, he should be fine. And another set of doctors saying that, look, maybe he needs rehabilitation, like under specialist doctor care and stuff. And then his trip to England, that's become another farce by itself. But that is something that can be resolved, and the PCB will resolve it, I'm sure. But it shouldn't have gotten to this in the first place.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I hope that this is a learning curve for the new medical team at the PCB, because Pakistan can ill afford not having Shaheen Shah Afridi with the squad at the T20 World Cup in Australia. I mean, we've seen Jasprit Bumrah just also get injured, and he's out of the T20 World Cup. So we want Shaheen there. We really do in that clash. And moving forward, Usman Bhai, another topic of hot debate. This has spurred a lot of controversy now, and it is Pakistan's approach to T20 cricket. Now, this polarizes opinion a lot. And personally, I feel that as a chasing side, Babar's Pakistan has botched a very small number of chases. Like 8 days out of 10, Pakistan will chase down any sort of target on any sort of surface and against any sort of opposition. We've seen it time and again. They've chased 200 plus versus the West Indies, South Africa, England most recently. But it's the target setting part. The first innings is where, you get the feeling it seems like Pakistan consistently leave 15 to 20 runs out there, and people are not quite happy with the circumspect approach by which they go about their business. Now, I do think that Babar and Rizwan are doing a very, very decent job up top. And more often than not, you'll see that they will get 85 to 90 runs in the first 10. But then Pakistan, has struggled in the middle overs. Those overs 8 to 13 is where we've seen them struggle, and they haven't quite been able to accelerate. So do you think that there is a problem with Pakistan's T20 approach in the first innings in particular? Does something need to be tweaked, or is this just the media making too much out of something that doesn't really exist?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think there is an issue there. But, like, Behram, if we were talking like a year ago about this would have been like one of those really data nerdy kind of debates that people have, that, people in the mainstream, people would be like, oh yeah, Babar is a great batsman and Rizwan's such a great batter as well, and it's not really a problem. But it's become amplified over time, and it's become a mainstream media issue. And the problem with that is that once it's become mainstream, the nuance in it has gone. So now, like you said very rightly, that it's this polarized debate where either you get rid of Babar and Rizwan, or you like break up that partnership, or they're just not good enough, or you stick with them. And that's not the case. There's nuance, like you pointed out, the fact that Pakistan chasing. I don't think I would have any other opening pair in the world really out there other than Babar. Very few. I can think of very few guys I would have who, and then it's the partnership as well between the two, the kind of trust that they have in each other. I don't think I'd have any other pair chasing a target down. And like you said very rightly, 8 out of 10 days they'll chase down any target. It's just every now and again they won't, of course, but they will mostly. Batting first, I think it's difficult to I don't like second guessing players. They're both out there to win as many games as they can for Pakistan. But I think one of our writers, Matt Roller, who's in Lahore for the T20s, he made a really good point about the chase that Pakistan, the defense that Pakistan did of their 147 yesterday, 145 I think it was.
146.
146, sorry, yeah. 146. So the point he made was, and he contrasted it with England's approach, is that when Pakistan have a bad batting day, especially batting first, their bottom floor level is still going to be higher than a lot of other sides who take that England or maybe the old West Indian approach where you just kind of, it's six or dot or whatever. I think, and Moeen Ali kind of acknowledged Rizwan's innings yesterday in the sense that, that's kind of the innings that we sometimes should be able to play, is that if you're struggling, you still get to a total that your bowling attack can defend. And, again, Pakistan are extremely lucky to have a very good T20 bowling attack right now. So they're probably confident that they can defend a lot of totals anyway. Maybe that breeds a little bit of the complacency up top in their batting, that, they know that if they get to 160, then they have like a 60-40 or 70-30% chance of being able to defend that against most sides. But I think that disguises the fact that there is an issue with, I think it's mostly intent at the top of the order. I mean, with somebody like Babar, you can see that he's got the game, right? He's clearly got the game. He's got the gift. He can do it all. And he's done it before. I think if you look back to his 2020, I think it was the last season that he had when he was opening with Tom Banton at Somerset. I think that season, and again, quality of attack was different and the pitches were different, but I think he really opened up his game in the power play in that season, and his strike rates, if I remember, in the power play were higher in that season than they have been at any other stage in his career. I'd have to double check, but I think that was the case. And so, he's got that capacity to kind of build up. Rizwan, I think, is different because he's more limited naturally as a batter, because, very few people are as gifted and expansive as Babar is. Rizwan, you can at least see the intent that he has in trying to, and maybe he doesn't have, the stroke play. With Babar, I feel like batting first, he maybe needs to show a little bit more intent sometimes in those first overs. Again, it's driven by all number of things. Like, he maybe doesn't think that the middle order is best maximized if they're coming in by the 10th or the 11th over. Maybe he wants to leave them till the 14th, 15th over. It's a strategy. And, you can argue that with Pakistan's record in T20s overall, it's worked for them more often than not. But I think the key question, and, maybe it was the case in the Asia Cup, and it will be at big tournaments. In bilateral series, you can kind of get away with it. But in a big tournament, when you come to a knockout stage, like Pakistan did last year with Australia, you have to kind of take that risk, I think. You have to have that belief in your middle order. You have to believe that somebody like Asif or somebody like Iftikhar or Khushdil can come in and you can give them like 7 overs, say 7, 8 overs, and really let them go wild. And that's, that also depends on how hard Babar is going on front. I feel instead of like breaking them up, because to me, it seems counterproductive to break them up as an opening partnership, given how good they are. There's an argument to be made that maybe if they bat first, you open with Fakhr, but Fakhr's out of the equation pretty much right now. I just feel like the kind of game that Babar has, the gift that he has, the talent that he has, I think he can go harder. And there was evidence of that when they chased down that 200 against England. Babar was playing shots that you don't always see him play. So clearly he can play those shots, and it's just a question of, and again, Bahram, we speak about it on the outside. It's difficult for players who have grown up valuing their wickets. Like, the one thing they've been told in their entire careers growing up is that you have to protect your wickets at all costs. For a player to then change that thinking even slightly for one format, to kind of think that, okay, I value my wicket a little bit less, it's almost like a reflexive thing, right? It's almost like saying that, if you burn me, I will not feel that pain. It's that kind of, it's that kind of teaching. You reflectively, you're like, oh, okay, that hurt. To tell a batter to not value their wickets or value their wickets a little less suddenly is going against a lifetime of what they've learned. So I would be very careful to be too harsh on either of them. I would just say that, yes, batting first on occasions, considering, like, if you take into account the wicket that you have. I think one of the things that Pakistan thought, which goes underplayed a little bit in that semi-final against Australia, was I think they felt that on that surface, that target was good enough. So, you go into each game and you're thinking, okay, I look at this pitch, I bat a little bit, and I think, okay, 170 is a decent power score for us. If we get over it, it's a bonus. If we don't, we don't. So, I don't want to second guess what they think, but I do feel like sometimes with Babar, you can see that he has another gear to kind of open up into, especially batting first.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a lot of good points over there. And I mean, yesterday, Pakistan defended 146 in the modern game with a wet ball in dewy conditions, which really is unheard of.
That's like an ODI defense of 200 or something, right? That's an ODI defense of 200 these days.
I would say 180, 190 even. Yeah. And it really is like spectacular, but you're not going to have that every day. And Babar and Rizwan, like, I wouldn't want to fault them too much because this batting pair has put up 5 150 plus partnerships in T20 cricket, which is a record. But of course, I think the best point you brought up over there is that, sure, this does work out for Pakistan, most times, more often than not, they will win. But when it comes to that crunch game, that knockout game, maybe this approach is a bit faulted. But then again, we'll wait and see. And I don't like to second guess them a lot either. I mean, I've grown up in an era where I haven't seen, peak Wasim, peak Waqar. So this is the best team that I've witnessed. And I don't like to be overcritical of them.
They're a really good side, man. And Rizwan and Babar as an opening pair and as players individually, they're phenomenal players. Like, Pakistan haven't had that level of players for a long time, if you think about it. And so you trust them to a degree that they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. 9 times out of 10, they'll do the right thing and they'll win for it. It's just that their losses have come and they've been magnified because they've come on big stages, semifinals of a World Cup and Asia Cup and stuff. So it does get magnified, but still, I would trust them to know what they're doing and to kind of build on that rather than try and break them apart.
I mean, they do have an open mind, this team, and they keep on evolving. And I do have high hopes. And here's to hoping, fingers crossed, that Babar's Pakistan does bring home at least one ICC trophy. On the same point, Usman Bhai, we've talked about the opening pair, and I want to move on to the middle order. Of course, this has been a major pain point in Pakistan cricket, regardless of the format. I mean, even in ODI cricket, Pakistan has struggled with respect to the middle order. And what I see when I look at Iftikhar, Khushdil, and Asif Ali is they are all belligerent hitters, very, very skilled at hitting the pace bowlers, but it's their troubles against spin.
Yeah.
They often look absolutely clueless against spin, absolutely at sea. That is an area of concern for me, because if you have three players which are one-dimensional, then you're saving them for the last 4-5 overs, and you often see Pakistan's middle order being reshuffled that way. And that I'm not quite sure what the strategy is over there. So do you think that this is a major area of concern, Pakistan's inability sort of to play spin with respect to the middle order?
Yeah, I think it's an issue for sure. I think it's an issue, like you said, they've looked like they've struggled against spin. I mean, the one thing is that we are going through an era where there has been really good spin bowling in T20s. I think spin plays a massive role in the format. And there are some excellent, like you might look at it and think, oh, Pakistan should come out and beat Afghanistan. But if you look at Afghanistan's spin attack, in the UAE or somewhere, that's a difficult ask. It's not easy. And it's, with the role that they have when they come in immediately and they have to go literally from ball one, it's not easy at all to be second guessing like spinners. Like, England struggled against Shadab yesterday, although he has a slightly different role and he's a very good spinner. But I think the spin thing is an issue, and it's difficult to know how to handle it other than to keep your batting order flexible. So Pakistan, one of the best things about the Asia Cup was that Pakistan were willing to be flexible about it. They sent Mohammad Nawaz up in one of the games up front. Shadab, I think, from the numbers, looks like he's a very good, spin basher, as the terminology goes. They utilize him more. One of the things I feel about Shadab is that somehow Pakistan haven't utilized his batting as much as they really should be doing. The seasons that he's had at the PSL, the last season, was interrupted by injury for him, but he's been having an outstanding season. His bowling right now is at a real peak. I think he's been bowling fantastically. He's injury free. Hopefully it remains that way. His bowling has really gone up a notch over the last, I would say, 6-7 months. Maybe actually since the PSL, it's really gone up a notch. But I think at international level, Pakistan, I don't know if it's a question of trust, because he's the vice captain, and he should be able to kind of influence these things. And he has a good relationship with Babar. And, Babar's not that kind of dictatorial captain who's not going to listen to you. I feel like there's been some hesitancy to send him up at number 4 every now and again. When you're facing... You're likely going to be facing some spin if you go in at number 4 in a T20 side, right? And if he's your best player against spin, as the numbers show, then why wouldn't you use that? Yesterday he came in, and I think with the first ball he hit Adil Rashid
down the ground for 6.
Down the ground for 6. He has a comfort, and if you can do that, and the numbers show that he can, then why are you not utilizing him? I don't know how much of a factor it will be at the World Cup. I'm not really sure what the Australian pitches are going to be like. They're not all kind of fast and bouncy and stuff. There will be some pitches, I'm sure, there which will kind of aid spin. So I don't know how much of a factor it's going to be, but it's something they need to look at. And it's not just the middle order. Babar and Rizwan struggle a little bit. Rizwan certainly struggles starting off against spin. He takes some time. I think his data shows that he takes a little bit of time to settle in against spinners. Babar struggles against spinners every now and again. Last year, again, I go back to the World Cup semi-final with his struggle against Zampa. These are quality bowlers that they're struggling against. So, one day you will, of course, come across a good bowler and struggle against them. But I think there's a pattern there that they have struggled. I think the middle order, yes, there are solutions to it. Short-term solutions like playing Shadab, like maybe playing Nawaz, up the order, depending on what the matchup is. And otherwise, I would think that, the PSL is the answer to all this. The more exposure your batters get to quality spinners in the PSL, the better they eventually get at facing them. Guys like Khushdil, guys like Asif, the more they're playing guys like Rashid Khan, Imran Tahir, a little bit to an extent, the more they're playing those guys and some local spinners, the better they're going to get. I think it's been maybe they haven't faced enough spin to kind of improve against it. But yeah, like you say, it is an issue. There are short-term answers, but I think it's the longer-term answers that you kind of really need to look at in terms of improving.
Absolutely. And you brought up matchups and, a fluid, dynamic, or flexible batting order, which is the need of the hour. You look at all of the T20 franchises doing it. You look at England doing it. And
Mm.
even India have delved into that, when they sent in Ravindra Jadeja up the order in that first game. And
Yeah.
that really helped them. And Pakistan, too. They sent in Nawaz in that second game. They benefited from it. But I feel like sometimes they do get those matchups wrong. Like you rightly mentioned, I do not think that they utilized Shadab Khan's batting to its full potential. And he could be your spin basher and could be sent up the order whenever those spin overs or middle overs are underway. But moving forward, just to step outside of Pakistan's national setup, I want to talk about Pakistan's domestic circuit. And we've been seeing a lot of young talent being unearthed. Most recently, it was Saim Ayub, who looks like a brilliant bat. And then you saw Mohammad Herrera last season. You've got fringe players like Saud Shakil, Kamran Ghulam, and you've got the PSL sort of to groom the limited overs talent, Usman Bhai. But with respect to the longer version, yes, you have the Qaid-e-Azam Trophy, but we're seeing a dearth of A tours now, which used to be quite frequent, and the Shaheens have not featured as frequently as we would have liked them. And I feel that that is critical towards the development of players in the longer format. So do you think that this is something that Pakistan needs to work on?
Yeah, 100%. If you look at India's resurgence, of course, there's a lot of money there, and it helps to have that money to be able to do this. But if you look at their resurgence, you can tie it into the kind of the Pathways program that they have through their academy, through domestic cricket, of course, as a feeder. But then the number of A tours that they are now playing, phenomenal. They're currently playing New Zealand, a strong New Zealand side as well, with a strong India side at home. I think there has been a movement over the last 3 or 4 years. So that's with under Ehsan Mani and Wasim Khan, and now even under Ramiz Raja, I think there has been a movement to try and get more tours for the Shaheen side. That's the only answer really, is to because you have, I think, enough. The first class cricket structure, I would like for there to be a couple more teams to offer a few more. I like the idea that you're kind of trimming it down to make it more competitive. I'm fine with that, but I think 6 teams is far too small a number for a country of 220 million people. I think that's fairly obvious.
Yep.
6 teams and 192 players that are on contracts with the PCB every domestic season. I think you can increase that number, not as much as it has been, but you can increase that number. And then once you've got that set up, I like the fact also that the Qaid-e-Azam Trophy now is, like, for 3 seasons running, they've had 6-team format, provincial associations playing against each other. I like that. Some stability in that domestic system is what was needed more than anything. I know there's been talk of maybe departments coming back, but wherever you sit on that divide between departments and regional associations, I think the key is that you need to stick to one structure for a while, and to really be able to assess its benefits or its disadvantages or whatever. So if you increase that a little bit and combine that with more Shaheen tours, and I think we talk about money, the PCB. I'm not going to say that they're making untold amounts of money, and I think their recent broadcast deal has not helped them at all. It's with the PTV. I think that they're actively losing money on that, which is not as it should be, but that's matters out of their control. You need to have a better broadcast market in Pakistan to be able to benefit from that. But I think the fact that they have survived, for a decade not playing at home, the fact that they've survived not playing India for so long, and they're still making money out of it, tells you that there is a robust model there from which you can make money. So, and there's a willingness, I think, there to invest money in things like Shaheen tours, A tours, Pakistan Junior League. I may have some reservations about it, but I can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to get younger players in there. They're trying to get younger players kind of fast-tracked into. I think there's a bit of overreaching with the idea of it there, but that's in its place. But I think they have the resources. I don't think we're the situation of, say, Sri Lanka or South Africa right now, where you don't have the resources to develop your players. I think there are just about still resources there for you to be able to invest money in Shaheen tours. And I think there's a willingness as well, from what I've heard from what Ramiz Raja says and others in the board say. I think there's some willingness there. The other thing is, of course, the international schedules are so crazy. Time, what tours do you pick? Where do you send people out for these tours and stuff? So I think that we shouldn't be complacent about it, but I think they will keep producing Test standard players for a while to come, just because cricket has spread so far and wide. The KP Khyber Pakhtunkhwa now is a real center for development of players, and who knows how many more players are going to come from there. There's just endless amounts of players coming from there. It's amazing, really, how they've contributed. And so I think players will keep coming, but yeah, it's important to not get complacent, and it's important to keep on top of making sure that you do provide for Shaheen Tours, making sure that you do have. They're doing great things, the PCB, with it's slightly off topic, but like the under-19 women's cricket team, they've never had one before, but they're now putting together an under-19 team for the T20 World Cup in South Africa in January. And so they're starting effectively from scratch, but they're doing it. They're taking them to camps. They've had a tournament in Lahore. They held a tournament in Muridke, for them. They are investing into these things. They just need to make sure whatever administration there is, that they don't get complacent about these kind of issues.
Absolutely. And of course, the PCB has been involved in a lot of good initiatives. And that brings me to my next topic, actually. And I want you to kind of assess the first year of Ramiz Raja's chairmanship. You brought up the PJL, and I know the purpose of it is to establish a pipeline to kind of feed into the PSL. And then, he's talked about drop-in pitches a lot. He's increased the stipend of players in first-class cricket, so there's a bit more security over there. And I, by the way, totally agree with you that 6 teams are not enough, even though I enjoy watching Central Punjab versus KP as opposed to absolutely. HBL versus PIA, right? Who wants to watch that? So I definitely like the idea, but maybe there are not enough teams. But I think Ramiz Raja, I'd say he has definitely acquired a passing grade. And maybe one area of critique would be the standard of pitches in Pakistan in Test cricket. We saw in that Australia series that Pakistan really put themselves at a disadvantage, and we weren't even sort of allowed to call them poor pitches, right? They were just batting tracks. So, there are pros and cons, and I kind of want you to carry out that critique on 1 year of chairmanship under Ramiz Raja.
I think, I look at it slightly more holistically, in the sense that, one of the things I really appreciated about the Ehsan Mani and Wasim Khan tenure was that Ehsan Mani had, the constitutional changes they brought to the board meant that Ehsan Mani had taken kind of a more symbolic and honorary role as chairman, which I think is what that role really should be. And, Wasim Khan was a much more active and proactive chief executive. I think one of the things that Ramiz has done, and this is not his fault, actually, because I think that was the nature of the role as Imran Khan, the prime minister at the time, who appointed him, he had envisaged it. And I think he, wanted one guy to be in charge. And so Ramiz came in as chairman, and he's now taken on the powers of chairman and chief executive. I know Pakistan has Faisal Hasnain as the chief executive officer, but Ramiz has been very hands-on in this first year. He's been very hands-on, and I don't blame him, because he knows that he's answerable to whoever the prime minister is right now, Shehbaz Sharif. But it was Imran at the time, and I think he thinks that if I'm answerable to the man upstairs, then I better do things that I want, and at least I should do it my way. So that's one thing is I had a bit of an issue with from the start. The other things, I think Ramiz's intentions have been good, and in that I think he thinks that there are things that he can bring to the table for Pakistan cricket which others can't. Corporate money, maybe. None of that has come so far. That's it's important to say that. I know he's got Engro involved. He wanted to get others involved in the pitches thing. I just feel like he's wanting to do a lot, take on stuff himself. And like I said, I understand why he does that. But I would prefer there to be a more kind of organizational role, in the sense that, you've delegated responsibility to your CEO and others, chief operating officer, who are carrying out like kind of cricket activities. And, Ramiz's argument, of course, is that as an ex-cricketer, I know what cricket needs. I don't 100% agree with that. I think, that if you're running a board, you're running an organization, and, you need to be a manager, I guess, or an executive, rather than just being an ex-cricketer. Some of the questions I would have about what he's done, I feel like there's maybe a neglect of the PSL happening, and the T20 landscape is changing really fast. We've got two new leagues, one in ILT20 and the SA20, who have scooped up a lot of the best players in the world, and they're offering big money. And I know that within the PSL, there is discontent that they seem to be kind of sitting around, not even knowing when, when the draft is going to happen. There was some talk that Ramiz wanted an auction in there, which I think has been rejected. The PSL is something that makes good money for the PCB. The franchise fees that they get every year is, kind of kept them afloat for a long time now. That is a product that you should really look after. And I just get the sense that, I don't know, maybe Pakistan are missing the boat a little bit on what's happening in the T20 landscape. And, Ramiz is there at the head. So maybe that other stuff that he's done, the pitches, I don't blame him for that. Like, it should not be his role to be looking at pitches. That should come under the operational aspect of the PCB. He should not. I know that, of course, as an ex-cricketer, he must have some input because he thinks that, he's played before. He has an idea of what the pitches should be like. I don't think he should be involved in that. That's not his kind of duty. Pitches should be some kind of operational management underneath him that should be doing it. And the pitches, by the way, it's partly the weather as well that affects them. But the pitches, if you remember, just before, like 2-3 years before this Australia series, we've gotten some great pitches in Karachi, in Pindi, in Lahore. I don't think they played, but a couple of the pitches in Karachi, you had spin, you had pace as well, you had a bit of bounce. You had some good batting conditions. Fawad Alam, that century that he scored against South Africa when they were 34 for 4, 34 for 5 or whatever. There's been some good pitches. Pindi was, has always been a great seaming pitch. So it was a surprise to see what happened to the pitches against Australia. And again, I don't think, like, I wouldn't blame Ramiz for that. Even if he had asked for like a certain kind of surface, I don't think he would have wanted a flat pitch like that. It just made for bad cricket all round. So I wouldn't put that on him. He's trying to make some changes with pitches, which is fine. I think, it makes sense to kind of keep an eye on domestic pitches, and give it some attention. It's good that he's giving these things attention. The increase in salaries for domestic cricketers, I think, was a great thing. I think it was long overdue. And it was something, to his credit, I think he's done it twice now, because he had said when he first came in that he would increase their fees by $1 lakh last season. And I think he did. And now he's increased them again. Absolutely fair dues to him. It's, you need to invest in cricketers at that level. You need to be paying them more money. So, that got approved by the board. That's been a good thing. From what I had been told, from what we had been told, the whole thing about Pakistani players in other leagues, I think his stance was actually okay with the ILT20. What I was told was that, the ILT20 wanted Pakistani players. And I think the PCB kind of said, well, you should pay us for the NOCs that you get, because we're giving you, players that we have groomed and brought together at this point. And in return, the ILT20, unlike any other leagues, by the way, this is an important point, unlike other leagues like South Africa or the BBL or, the Blast or the 100 or whatever, unlike those leagues, you can't take any player from the ILT20 in return. You can't say to the Emirates Cricket Board or whoever's running that league that, look, I'll give you some of my players, but when it comes to the PSL, how about you give us some of your players? Because they don't have any players. Right. So, Ramiz rightly thought, I think, and if this is how it turned out, which is, one version of the events, I think Ramiz rightly argued that, well, we're not getting anything from you in return, and we're giving you our best players at a time when we need them because we have a busy international schedule. You should pay us for it. And they said no, and okay, fine, that's that. It stops the players from playing for Pakistan, from earning money, which isn't great. But I can see where his logic came from on that. And similarly, I think, with I think, long story short, is that like other administrators, like other chairmen, there's been some stuff that he's done which has been good, some stuff that he's done which you could question. Like I would question not the intent behind the Pakistan Junior League. I think it's a good idea, but I would question like the ambition that they had with it. They thought that they could get like corporates out to buy franchises for it, and there wasn't a response really from the market to buy those franchises, which now means that is an extra cost on the PCB. Now, it's good because, rather than looking at it as a cost, you're looking at it as an investment in terms of players, which is fine. But is that something that's going to be sustainable over a longer term? Next year, if somebody else comes in as chairman, and, it's been known to happen that chairman change in Pakistan, next year somebody else comes in, they might be like, well, this is a white elephant. Why have we got the Pakistan Junior League? And so those players who played in the first one are like, well, now my opportunity is gone. So I just wonder if it is sustainable to keep running it at the PCB's cost, rather than running it through a franchise thing. And the fact that no corporate sponsors really wanted to buy into the franchises, I think, kind of revealed a central drawback maybe with the idea is that, you know, sponsors want to pay for recognizable names and brands. You know, a sponsor will come and pay for Lahore Qalandars because they have Shaheen Afridi and Rashid Khan. But if you're going to do it for Gujranwala Giants or whatever, you know, you don't recognize the under-19 player because you don't know him, because, you know, there's that public isn't. So maybe the product is so good in this first year that, you know, next year people are interested in it, and I hope really that is the case. But I just feel like they maybe overreached a little bit on the ambition on what they were trying to do there, and maybe it's not been thought out as much in the long term as it should have been before it came out. So, you know, his first year, mixed. I would say he's at least he's communicative. He's, you know, out there trying to speak to people and very hands-on in what he does. I would question if he needs to be that hands-on when he has a executive team underneath him who's doing a lot of the stuff. And yeah, again, he's beholden to political forces as well, as is always the case in Pakistan. You know, right now we're in kind of a flux situation where we have a government, but we don't know how long they're going to be around. And I think, you know, that must play at the back of your mind as a chairman. You know that you're kind of beholden to whatever power brokers are in play at that stage. It must operate at the back of his mind as well. And so that makes the job doubly hard.
Absolutely. And I think one of the major takeaways from all that you said right now is there is no separation of duties. So he hasn't really left a structure that Ramiz is not going to be here forever. And once he leaves, what will happen thereon? Will the PJL be sustainable? Will it be, you know, continued? How will all of these duties then be carried out? Because Ramiz is pretty much a one-man show right now. But I'd still think that, as you rightly pointed out, that the intention is good and he's trying to do as much as he possibly can in this 3-year period. But then again, you know, it comes with its pros and cons. And of course, we do wish Ramiz Raja the best of luck. And one last topic I'd like to discuss with you, Usman Bhai, you kind of touched upon it earlier as well, is the direction that the game is headed in general, especially franchise T20 cricket. You know, we've seen a proliferation of T20 cricket over the last decade and a half. And now you pointed out that there are 2 new leagues coming in, the Emirates League and the South African League, which also has heavy Indian investment in it, which could be counterproductive to Pakistan cricket. And I just want to know your thoughts on how do you think Pakistan can cope with this moving into the future, because we already don't play the IPL. And if we don't play the other premier tournaments, then you know, apart from the PSL, what exposure are our players getting? Will they be able to, you know, right now you've got a wonderful crop of players, but will you be able to continuously produce new crops under this sort of global model, which doesn't really seem to favor Pakistan cricket?
Yeah, you know, it's difficult. I have immense sympathy for Pakistani players in this. I have a little bit of sympathy for the PCB. And, you know, we did a story yesterday about like Pakistani players kind of being frozen out. And that's partly, I think, down to, it's a bit of both. It's down to obviously Indian investors in the South Africa League who are wary of, you know, because of political ties, they're wary of taking on Pakistani players. They're not completely averse to the idea, because we know that some franchises have reached out to Pakistani players. It's also partly because the PCB has not been giving NOCs for its lead players, which again, I understand, because, you know, you have a full international schedule at home. You have New Zealand, then you have West Indies, you have the England Test Series. Why would you give away like your best players? You know, at that time you want them to play in your tournament. But I think it doesn't look great. You know, if you speak to organizers at the SA20, for example, and the ILT20, both, they'll both tell you that, yes, we do want Pakistani players at some point, because they're some of the best players in the world. You know, top-ranked T20 batter. Babar is up there in the rankings constantly. Shaheen is always up there. Shadab is probably one of the best kind of all-rounders in the game right now in T20s. You know, they will obviously want the best players in their leagues. And so I think it kind of becomes a little bit dependent on the political situation between India and Pakistan. I think that's something that, you know, nobody, not the PCB, not the players, can control. You know, what that means for the future, you know, Pakistani players have lived without the IPL now for over a decade, for 14 years. It hasn't hurt them. I don't think it stopped their development. I think, you know, the PSL, getting the PSL off the ground was one of the greatest achievements of any Pakistani administration over the last however many years. You know, it was just amazing to be able to start that abroad and then bring it back home and really create a product that, you know, fans engage with, they're really into, that has benefited players, that has, you know, so it's been an amazing achievement to do that, first of all. And I think as long as that keeps going, and as long as you keep ensuring that the PSL is a good product, and, you know, the next few years are difficult ones for the PSL because, you know, there's 1 year where they've got the Champions Trophy in Pakistan, and that's going to move the PSL to March probably, where then it might clash with the IPL, but, you know, it's not ideal. These two leagues, then, you know, these two new leagues, which happened just before the PSL, kind of take a lot of players away for a little while at least. I think there's like a 3 or 4 day clash with the start of the PSL and the end of the two leagues this year. So it's not a massive clash, but it eats into your player availabilities. The PSL, because of the Pakistani economy, maybe cannot offer the kind of money that these two leagues are offering. So, you know, they need to work hard to kind of ensure. And I think, you know, Ramiz, the indications from Ramiz have been that they've been talking to other boards. So, you know, including Cricket Australia and this, to South Africa as well, and I think England, to kind of maybe form some kind of alliance whereby they can ensure that, you know, the PSL and Pakistani players keep kind of get, you know, there were a lot of Pakistani players in county cricket this year, for example. There will be, if there's availability, there will be Pakistani players in the 100. There will be more in the 100. There's always Pakistani players in the Blast. In the CPL, there's maybe not as many as there should have been this year, but, you know, there are still a few. They will have avenues and opportunities, but I think, yeah, the PCB need to fortify and be willing to offer NOCs to players who may not be, you know, if you're not somebody like Azam Khan, if you're not going to be selecting him for, or if you're not going to give him a central contract with the national team, which is fine, you know, you're within your rights to do it if you don't see him as an option. I think allow somebody like Azam Khan to play in other leagues, to really build up his game. Don't make it difficult for him to play in the CPL. Don't make it difficult for him to play in the ILT20. Let him go. You know, players who are outside the kind of central core group of players that you control with a central contract, let them, you know, go and develop. And if you're open about that, you know, franchises, there were a number of franchises who own teams in South Africa and the ILT20 who said that, you know, picking Pakistani players will be an issue for us. But there are also teams there that said, let's try and pick some Pakistani players. And they reached out, they made kind of, you know, not formal offers, but they kind of reached out to players through agents and said, you know, what is the availability looking like? And I think that is where the PCB's attitude was like, okay, we're not going to give NOCs initially. I think put a lot of these leagues off Pakistani players. That's a temporary thing. That's for this year. You know, maybe next year it'll be different. So maybe, you know, it's so soon right now. It's not even happened that we don't know how much it's going to play out. But I think Pakistan needs to make sure that they're in the game rather than on the outside. You know, they've been on the outside of the IPL. It wasn't in their control. If there's an opportunity for some of their players to play in the SA20 and the ILT20, and it doesn't clash with international commitments, then I think they should give them that opportunity to play. I think the board needs to be fairly open in how they do this. You remember, Baram, a couple of years ago, when players didn't get an NOC for the T10, there was some talk of almost a strike kind of action happening, you know, and Wasim Khan had to intervene and speak to players on, you know, directly to kind of ensure that that wouldn't happen. So, you know, players will also see these opportunities. They'll be like, well, you know, I want to play. I want to play in these leagues. I want to make some money. So I think they need to not hammer. They need to not handle it with a hammer. They need to be sensitive to players' needs. They need to be sensitive to what they need. They need to be sensitive to making that balance. Boards have done it. New Zealand cricket have done it. England have done it. West Indies have done it. Every board really, apart from India, of course, which is a different case altogether, but every board has kind of worked out a way of ensuring that their players are happy playing and that they're also available for the national side. So there is a way. There's a way to do this. And I think the PCB, the administration needs to be aware enough and flexible enough and open enough to be able to work that for their players as well. And I think on just the very last point is that I think it would greatly help if Pakistan had a players association and which they could bargain and barter for these things and argue for these things and negotiate these positions as one body and as one voice rather than, you know, disparate players doing it individually.
Yeah, I mean, it is a tricky predicament moving into the future. And, you know, one thing about Pakistan cricket, which you often have spoken about, is that Pakistan cricket is resilient. It has, stuck through the test of time. And we are here today quite, surprisingly, because Pakistan cricket, it's taken one jolt after another, one hit after another. And yet we are one of the top teams in the world. Probably not in the top three, but just on the outskirts of it. And this is a golden generation. So I really hope the PCB manages this entire situation well. And of course, you mentioned very rightly that a players association is the need of the hour. And rather than having these, disparate sort of conversations happening on the side, maybe if there is one players association, something good can come out of that. And the PCB needs to be more sensitive to the issue and have its eyes open and not lose the players' trust either. But that's a wrap for this episode. Osman Bhai, thank you so much for taking out the time. It's been absolutely wonderful talking cricket with you, particularly Pakistan cricket. And I hope you had as much fun as I did.
I did. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, it was great to talk, sensibly about the issues affecting Pakistan cricket. Yeah. And it was very good. Thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome. And yes, viewers, if you enjoyed this episode, do like it, share our content, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms. We are trying to change the landscape of cricket coverage in Pakistan. We're trying to move away from sensationalism and bring the focus back to cricket. So if you enjoy our work, share it, talk about it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. I'll catch you soon enough. I know we've kind of not had an episode in quite a while, but I'll try to be more regular. I am currently traveling, but of course, thank you for all of your support. And yes, I'll see you when I'll see you. Thank you once again, Osman Bhai. That's it for now. Goodbye.